Hi, my name is Parker Starr, and I decided to do my Indigenous place-based lesson on Indigenous knowledge and cultural weather perspectives, mainly focusing on the cultural weather perspectives aspect. Um, so my lesson objectives, or excuse me, my audience to start out will be middle school age students, and my objectives for those middle school age students will be to be able to identify and explain the characteristics that distinguish weather from climate, and to understand environmental behaviors to identify weather patterns. That's basically the extent of my lesson, and pretty simple, but it should be good. Um, so, going into the lesson, a little background of indigenous peoples and different cultures of how they uh, view weather patterns and how they came up with their own ideas of how to predict the weather essentially. So in Canada, identifying the cycle of season patterns was important to the Métis people. The Métis people also observed the moon and animal behaviors for when winter came. Being observant of such patterns allowed the people to gain knowledge of the local environment, which allowed them to prepare for weather changes each year. In Europe, the people forecasted their spring by watching many hibernating animals. The hedgehog was woken up at the beginning of February. If the day was cloudy and no shadow was cast, this meant spring was coming early. If the hedgehog was woken up on a sunny day and saw its own shadow, there would be 6 more weeks of winter. You can kind of see that the hedgehog thing is kind of a North American groundhog that we use. The groundhog comes up, sees his pattern. So culturally, that's a different idea of what they did. They used the hedgehog, and continuing on, the Métis people interpreted the weather their entire lives, and they were very good at it. They used influences of the moon, plants, and animals to interpret the weather. It is significant I believe it's significant to know that the Cree Nation identify the moon in 13 phases in the sky to understand the effect of the seasons of the earth. The 13 phases teaching comes from the back of a turtle because of its 13 spheres on its shell. So I have a visual of the turtle and the 13 spheres. Um, the 13 spheres to understand the effect of the seasons of the earth. So this is where they got that from. So moving on into kind of phase one and of understanding of weather versus climate. So I want my middle school age students to understand the difference between weather versus climate. The definitions simply are this: weather, the day-to-day environment conditions in the location. Simple. Climate definition: the weather conditions of an area averaged over many years. So after giving this definition, I would like to give them a visual, and my printer didn't want to cooperate with me and print out in color, but we have two of the same country here, and I would like them to, my middle school students, be able to tell me which map portrays the climate and which map portrays the weather. And you can see on this one, there's the degrees and how hot and how cold the place is, and this is kind of more of a climate side, and you could say a climate-ish, and this is more of the weather side, day-to-day weather. So I would give this to them and ask them to let me know what side they believe is climate, what side they believe is weather, and I would tell them if they're right and wrong. And then we'd move on to help better understand concepts. So I would ask them several questions about this. And my first question would be, when you wake up in the morning and you think about going outside, what are you thinking about, weather or climate? How does this affect your day? That kind of gets the gears rolling a little bit about what are they really thinking about, the weather or the climate? My second question is, when you plan what you're going to do Christmas Day, are you thinking about weather or climate? This also kind of gets the the gears working up in the brain. And the third question, if you plan to travel to the mountains during Christmas break, are you thinking about weather or climate? What would you have? Would you have the same plans if you stayed at home? This is kind of a more direct question. It's going to really make them think, and this will be discussed in class. Their answers, and then phase 2, we go into a understanding environmental behaviors to identify weather patterns. So a little bit of background, for those who look for it, especially indigenous people, they're really good at being able to predict weather patterns based on the environment. The changing of fur on animals, animal fur might be lighter in the winter and darker at the end of winter, which indicates spring is coming. While in winter, the birds begin to return from the south. That's a sign of winter ending. Beavers pile up a stash of food. This is an indicator of a possibly being a longer winter. If you spot the leaves turning upright on a black polar tree, that tells someone that it's going to rain. That tells you that it's going to rain. Birds will disappear when storms are approaching. Well, when the moon is shaped like an upside down cup, it's an indicator that a storm is coming. So all these environmental behaviors identify weather patterns, and it just takes someone to let you know what to look for. So what I will do is next is give them a homework assignment to fill out a worksheet of animal behavior and cloud behavior to predict weather. There's also a third section on there that's kind of a little fun thing for them. It stays along the lines of predicting weather, but it's more of other weather predictions, like a person's joint pain or storms that come up fast, or the dew on the grass. So on the worksheet, this is the assignment. On the assignment is the predicting weather assignment, and then I give them the actual animals. So they have to go look for frogs and how frogs' behavior predicts weather, and how birds' behavior predicts weather, and how groundhogs' behavior predict weather. And then it moves on to clouds, and the high clouds, tall clouds, and other. So they have to go find their own type of clouds and how that clouds predict weather. And then, like I said, the other weather predictions: a person's joint pain, storms that approach fast, and then the dew on the grass, how that might predict weather. And they have to go home and research this online and turn it in the next day. So this is kind of like my lesson plan of cultural weather perspectives on a place-based lesson. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it made sense. And if you have any questions, let me know. Yeah, that's all I got. Thank you so much. Appreciate you listening. So thanks.